Good morning. This is Jan Melnick, and today I'm going to be talking about something virtually every professor must face on ground and, in our case, online, and that is student plagiarism. From my research, I've identified that there are three really common problems that present with respect to plagiarism. Honest mistake, student is sloppy or lazy and cuts corners, and unfortunately, flagrant dishonesty, where a student truly does set out to attempt to deceive a professor. So, breaking them down, beginning with our honest mistake, we've talked in other threads about this being a teachable moment, a chance for us to educate a student, perhaps a young or traditional student who's not really had to use APA, MLA, Chicago, Turabian in terms of references, formatting, and citing. For millennials who've grown up Googling everything, they believe that most material is in the common domain and freely take things without recognizing the need for attribution. With every instance of plagiarism, though, I recommend capturing in an email the details and creating an email chain to document how it is presented back to the student as that teachable moment, and then sharing resources, examples in our classes. I always use a resource section at the beginning of every Canvas module that includes APA style, which is my preference for student papers. I give good examples of books, journal articles, and websites, the three most common things they're likely to use for their citations, and I show precisely what is needed. With my students, I typically will provide either 50% credit for resubmission of material within 3 days, depending on the class, or deduct 10% per day up to 3 days late, so that for perfect work, they can earn a 70 instead of a 0, or maybe a 50 instead of a 0. I give them that opportunity because we want them to learn. We don't want them just to abandon all hope that they can't possibly get a passing grade. I'm sure this looks familiar. When Turnitin flags this kind of plagiarism, and for this student it was 51%, and you can see why, I take a screenshot and then I embed that in the email to show precisely what I'm seeing, and then I share what the resources are that Turnitin flags so that there's no question around where this material is coming from. I've included in this presentation a couple of my actual emails. I'm not going to read them here, but if you wanted to see how I address it with a student, the language is there, and the moment to provide how they should do a citation or a reference is clearly called out. I always talk about what the consequences will be, what the acceleration is if this kind of behavior continues, and that it really is a serious offense. But I do so in a way that allows them to learn and resubmit. After this particular student fixed the problem, I responded in class. She earned a 50% instead of the 0. She didn't understand how I knew that it came from student paper, so I explained how to read it and turn it in and showed her. And this is good because students do need to know what the resources are that we have. It can help to keep students, parentheses, those that really want to, honest. This is a great graphic. I use it with all of my classes, and I've included in the resources what you can do if you'd like to use Curtis Newbold's great illustration of just exactly what is plagiarism and how to avoid it. Sloppy or lazy students. Let's face it, we're always going to have students that are pushing up against the clock, last-minute rush submissions, and if it's a paper that they should have been writing over the course of several weeks and accumulating their references, this is the point where they oftentimes will forget to include them. One of the methods to counteract this is to require checking in, sharing those references, those resources up front. I mentioned in one of our earlier weeks that for all of my PowerPoint presentations, I ask students to submit the first 5 slides several weeks before the final project is due. and to include their citations. This way, A, they're on track with the project, and B, they know that they have to start collecting those references. And while formatting may not be complete, at least they've got the material that they can reference. With one particular student, Jennifer in this case, I talked about what she had done, and in this case she had cut and pasted from a variety of sources, did not bother to change font style, formatting. It was very clear that it was just strictly a cut and paste job with only one sentence, her opening sentence, that was original to her. I shared what needs to be done for proper academic work, how she should draw from the textbook readings, complement with her external research, but she can't simply paraphrase without attributing to the source. And again, for some students, this is new information. For some, it's clear that they're trying to skirt around the edges of what is acceptable. Learning opportunity, I reinforce that always because we want our students to go forward. Probably the classes we're teaching are not their final class in academia. They're going to have other opportunities to learn to do proper citations and references. With students for whom flagrant dishonesty is the marker, these students may wait to the last minute, but they could be carefully trying to change fonts and styles so that it's not readily apparent that they've done the sloppy cut and paste in. With these students, though, typically by now, we know what student writing typically is. Our top type A high achievers turn in a kind of writing that we recognize. And for them, it would be harder to see if they were flagrantly cheating the system. And in most cases, they're not going to. But for students whose work has been mediocre all along, to suddenly turn in a brilliant paper, it almost always will raise flags where we know a student did not write this. And so that can be one of the ways that we immediately recognize it. How we handle it, same way. I reach out with an email. Sometimes, if it's truly over the top, I will ask the student to please call me and we arrange a time. For the most part, though, I'm capturing the detail in an email, outlining the steps, showing the areas where the transgression occurred, and pointing out what the opportunity could be or what the consequences will be. If this is the second offense, typically they automatically are going to earn a 0 for the class per university policy, depending where I'm teaching. In other cases, it could go up from there to expulsion. I've never seen that happen, but I have had one student fail a class for this reason. I've certainly had a number of students fail an assignment when either not taking the opportunity to resubmit or simply walking away from the class. Obviously, we try not to have that happen, but occasionally things are beyond our control and we can't fix everyone and everything. Additional strategies. Some of the things, in addition to the points that I've mentioned, the plagiarism chart, asking for material up front, would include making certain that assignments feature very specific questions that can't be readily Googled, and invite the student to share their own opinion. You can't get someone else's opinion, and that's what one of my students tried to do if you do go back and read the emails. I ask students to include fully developed citations early on so that I know they're aware that they need to do that and that they haven't forgotten it. By requiring those early, I can point them to other sources, or if they're only doing the URL link, I mention that they need to have more annotated material, circle them back to either Purdue OWL or the APA sources that I've provided, and again, making the consequences very clear. Plagiarism is perhaps one of the foremost and richest of postmodern dilemmas, so said Cleary, quoting Bowden. These were the references that you can revisit if you'd like to, in particular, see Curtis Newbold's chart, Did I Plagiarize? And I thank you for joining me today.